Liam's phone lit up in the middle of the night, throwing a cold streak of light across the ceiling. I was lying with my back to him, trying to sleep but not really asleep, and that glow cut through my thoughts like a pair of scissors. I turned over, planning only to flip the phone face down so it wouldn't keep us awake. But the moment my fingertip touched it, the screen brightened, and the words popped up so clearly it felt like someone was whispering them right next to my ear. "I miss you." I froze. For a few seconds, I didn't breathe. Not because it hurt, but because my body switched into full alert like I'd just seen something that shouldn't exist in my world. I didn't touch anything else. I didn't open the message. I didn't scroll through the history. I just looked at it and let the truth sit there. I can face any truth as long as it stays still long enough for me to see its shape. I put the phone back exactly where it was and lay down like I'd never woken up. But my eyes stayed open in the dark for a long time. Part of me wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. Another part felt a cold line run down my spine because my body had sensed Liam's shift weeks ago. I just hadn't forced it to name it. The next morning, when I walked into the kitchen, Liam was standing with his back to me, holding a glass of water as if he'd paused mid-motion. He flinched when he heard my steps on the floor, not the sleepy kind, the kind of person hiding something and afraid it might show. I didn't say anything. I just looked at his back for a few seconds. The space between us felt strangely empty. He turned around and gave a tired smile. "You're up early." His voice had a way of dodging, like someone steering the conversation away before it touched anything dangerous. I asked a few simple questions: what he was doing today, if he slept well. The same things I ask every morning, but this time he answered fast, short, and his eyes never stayed on my face for more than a second. Instead of leaving his phone on the table like he always did, he slipped it into the pocket of his hoodie, a move so clear it felt like underlining the word unusual. I saw all of it, not because I'd been suspicious from the start, but because his small changes were like sounds in a quiet house at night. The more you try to ignore them, the louder they get. All day, I watched without letting him know. The moment that stood out the most was when we sat on the couch. I sat beside him, and normally he'd lean on my shoulder or rest his hand on my leg. But that day, he shifted slightly away, just a small inch, but enough for me to feel a wall rising between us. When his phone vibrated in his hoodie pocket, he got up right away, saying he needed to call a coworker back. He stepped out onto the porch, leaving the door cracked just enough that I couldn't hear a thing. I'd lived with him long enough to know which silences were normal and which were intentional. And that day, every silence he had meant something. In the afternoon, while I was cleaning the office, I opened an old drawer to look for some papers. Mixed in with everything was a photo I'd seen before, but never thought much about. Liam stood next to a young woman, his face angled slightly away from the camera, and a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, clung tightly to his arm. Back then, I assumed it was from his younger years. Too many friends, too many undefined relationships. He never talked about the picture, and I never asked. But today, looking at it again, something felt completely different. It was like a puzzle piece suddenly lit up and demanded its place in a picture I hadn't even realized I was looking at. I set the photo down. The small signs from years ago, the gaps in his stories about his past, all turned heavy at once. There was something between him and his history that I hadn't touched yet. What hurt most wasn't the message. It was the possibility that I'd never truly known the man who sleeps next to me every night. As the sun went down, something in me went quiet in a way I couldn't explain. Not loud, not the kind of jealousy that spirals, just the feeling of being left behind in my own home. People think betrayal starts with another person. Sometimes it starts with a very long silence. That night, when Liam went into the bathroom, he left his phone on the bed. I looked at it for a moment. I could have opened everything, put all the pieces together, proved what I thought I'd seen, but I didn't. I chose something else, something that would force him to answer me, not with excuses, but with the truth. I picked up the phone and opened that message thread. The words "I miss you" were still there, quiet like a trap I'd stepped into without knowing. I set my fingers on the keyboard. What I felt wasn't anger or heartbreak. It was a tired kind of clarity. I typed one word. Just one. Why? I didn't send it to fight over anyone. I sent it because I needed to know what I was dealing with, whether it was a crack we could fix or a piece of truth I could no longer avoid. I set the phone down, listened to the steady sound of water running in the bathroom, and knew that whatever this turned into, it wouldn't be gentle. But if the truth was knocking, I didn't want to hide anymore. When I sent the message, why, my hands were still a little shaky, but my mind was quiet, like water before a storm. I tried to act normal when Liam walked out of the bathroom. We didn't say much that night. I didn't want to ask, and he didn't notice I was waiting for a small earthquake under all that silence. The next morning, while I was making breakfast, my phone buzzed once. The message came fast enough that I knew the sender had been waiting for me all night. "We need to talk. Please." I stood still for a moment, feeling my heartbeat slow in a strange way. I typed back, "Who are you?" I thought I'd get a name, or a confession, or some explanation that would put an end to all the guessing. But no. There was no answer to my question. Instead, another message popped up. "Can you send me the address? It's important." I stared at the screen. A strange feeling crept down my spine. No one texts like that if it's just an affair. No one asks for an address with that kind of desperation. But I didn't send anything. My instincts pulled me back. I put the phone down and decided to wait, to see what would happen if I didn't respond. I didn't expect that a few hours later, someone would knock on our door. The sound was soft, but it was enough to make me shoot up from the couch. When I opened the door, the sight in front of me stunned me so much I forgot to breathe. The girl stood there, looking like she'd walked a long way. Her hair was messy from the wind, her hand gripping the strap of her backpack, her eyes red as if she'd cried for days. But what struck me most was the trembling determination in her expression, a small, fierce kind of courage. "I think you know who I am," she said, her voice rough and unsteady. "I'm looking for Liam." That sentence dropped onto my doorstep like something heavy, but her eyes, they didn't look like someone who came to start a fight or take someone or blow up a family. They were too tired, too hurt, too real. I opened the door, not because I trusted her, but because something in me knew this wasn't the script I'd prepared for. There was something here far outside anything I'd imagined. She introduced herself as Maya, 19. She stood in the living room without sitting down. Her hands trembled a little, like she was trying not to fall apart in front of a stranger. I invited her to sit, and it took her a few seconds before she finally let her backpack slip off her shoulder. Then she pulled a photo from her jacket pocket. My heart sank the moment I saw it. The old photo. The one I'd found in Liam's drawer. Liam standing next to a woman I didn't know, and a little girl clinging to his arm. And the wide, round eyes of that child in the picture looked so much like the eyes staring at me now that a chill moved through me. Maya placed the photo on the table carefully, like it might break. "Is he home?" she asked. I stayed quiet. Not because I wanted to protect Liam, but because I had no idea what kind of shock was waiting on the other side of my answer. I just looked at her and saw her shoulders trembling, just barely. She didn't look like someone coming to accuse or demand anything. She looked like someone who'd come too far to turn back, hoping the door in front of her wouldn't slam shut. She started talking without me asking. Maya said she'd been looking for Liam for years. She only knew his name, his face, and that he once lived somewhere around here, from bits of information she'd gathered after her mother passed away. She'd never had an exact address. All she had was a phone number she believed used to belong to him. The "I miss you" message wasn't romantic. It was a message thrown into the void, hoping a man she'd never met might answer. "I just want to know if he's still alive," Maya said, hands twisting together. "I don't have anyone else." My throat tightened. The pieces started fitting together in a way I didn't want them to. Liam might have a child. But what hurt more than the idea itself was realizing he'd lived beside me all these years without saying a word about a real, breathing person now sitting in front of me, with eyes full of need and loss. Looking at Maya felt like looking straight into a hidden part of my husband. A secret I wasn't given the choice to know. A secret bigger than any fear of betrayal in the usual sense. While I was trying to keep my breathing steady, a memory hit me. I remembered years ago, when I asked Liam about his younger days, about an old relationship, and he said only, "It's complicated." His voice then sounded like he was closing a door I wasn't allowed to walk through. I didn't ask more. I thought giving him his space was the right thing to do. But some private spaces are built for protection, and some are built to hide things. I never knew the difference until now. Maya looked at me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can I see him? Just talk to him?" I didn't say no, but I didn't nod right away either. I needed a few seconds to steady whatever was spinning hard inside me. I invited her to sit a little longer and poured her some water. Her hands still shook as she held the glass, like her whole body was running on its last nerve. I told her to wait a moment. I needed time to breathe, to understand where this was about to take us. Maya nodded, eyes lowered to the floor like she was used to waiting, used to hoping for something that might not happen. And then I heard the front door open. I knew that sound. Liam's footsteps, the way he set his keys on the wooden table. I turned my head. Liam walked in, not yet noticing anything different in the room, until his eyes landed on Maya. His whole body stopped, like the air had just been pulled out of him. The room went completely still. I looked at the two of them, and in that moment, I knew all three of our lives had just stepped into a chapter none of us were prepared for. Liam froze in the doorway like he'd just seen the thing he feared most in his life. His hand stopped mid-air. The keys slipped from his fingers and hit the floor, and he didn't even notice. His eyes locked onto Maya, and Maya sat still on the edge of the couch, her hands clenched so tightly they'd gone pale. No one said anything for a few seconds that felt as long as an entire winter. The first thing Liam managed to say came out rough and thin. Ready to break. You shouldn't be here. I stood beside them, feeling every silence between us from the past years rise all at once and crowd the room. Maya lifted her head, and in the moment their eyes met, I saw something I couldn't name. Not anger, not blame, but a kind of pain the two of them shared, yet neither had the strength to speak aloud. Maya took a deep breath, trying to stay steady in front of the man she'd spent 3 years searching for. She didn't circle around it. She didn't accuse him. She didn't hate him. She had only one question, and it cut through the room clean and sharp. I just want to know why you left. Liam stepped back a little, as if her question had gone straight through him. His fingers trembled when he lifted his hand to his forehead. He avoided her eyes, then avoided mine. I could see the fear in every small movement. Not fear of Maya, but fear of facing a part of his life he'd buried so deep he thought it would never return. He sat down in the chair across from her, and I stayed behind her, quiet, watching, as if I had to witness all of this to understand what my marriage had really been built on. Liam started talking. His voice was uneven, like someone repeating a story he was afraid to touch. He said that years ago he met a girl named Rachel. Young, impulsive, beautiful in a way that made people want to run after her without thinking about the next day. But Rachel was unstable. They met at a time when Liam was the most lost he'd ever been. We were both a mess, he said, staring at the floor. When Maya was born, everything changed so fast no one could control it. Rachel wasn't ready to be a mother. Liam didn't know what to do except try to do the right thing. But Rachel's instability kept growing. Days when she vanished without warning, bursts of anger with no cause, stretches when she disappeared and then came back like nothing had happened. And then one day, Rachel left the place they lived, taking Maya with her while she was still very little. No goodbye. No note. No address. Nothing. Liam lost them completely. I watched him as he said this. His face didn't hold blame, only old pain, deep and still intact. Maya listened with her eyes wide but unblinking. She didn't cry, but her whole body was pulled tight like a string. Liam went on. He said that for years he tried to find them. He sent money to an account Rachel had left behind, even though he never got a response. He wanted to see Maya, but Rachel once told him during a brief phone call, "If you try to see her, I'll disappear again." That sentence hung in the room. It explained so much, yet opened up a new bitterness of its own. Liam said he believed keeping his distance was the best thing for Maya, that showing up might make her already unstable life even more dangerous. Every time he thought about searching for her again, the fear that Rachel would disappear with Maya kept him frozen. I listened, feeling both sympathy and anger. Sympathy because Liam had clearly carried this pain in silence for years. Anger because he chose that silence instead of sharing it with the person who lived beside him. A choice meant to protect Maya, but one that built a life full of secrets instead. 3 years ago, Rachel died. Maya was 16 then, living with a friend of her mother's. Any information about Liam had been kept from her almost completely. When that friend eventually moved away, Maya lost contact with everyone on her mother's side. She was left with only one truth. Her father's name was Liam, and he had loved her once, back when she was too young to remember. And so Maya spent 3 years searching. She sent the "I miss you" message not because she missed a father she grew up with. She was too young to remember any of that. She sent it because she had no one left in the world to say those words to, because it was the only way to see if anyone out there might hear her. When Maya said that, her voice didn't shake anymore. It sounded like someone who had reached the very end of loneliness and hope, yet was still standing. My throat tightened. Not because of Liam. Because of Maya, a child knocking on the door of her own life, not knowing whether love or rejection waited on the other side. I looked at Liam. His face had gone pale. He pressed a hand to his mouth, trying to swallow a sob. I'd never seen him like that. I'd never seen a man as strong and decisive as him shake so hard he didn't know where to put his hands. And I had to face the truth inside myself. I was hurt that Liam hid all this from me, but that pain was nothing compared to watching Maya sit there, fingers twisted together, waiting to see if she would be rejected one more time. I turned to Liam. My voice was low but clear. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Liam closed his eyes. "I was ashamed and afraid you'd leave." Those words weren't an excuse. They were a bare confession. And in that moment, I understood. Our marriage wasn't broken by a third person. It was worn down by the empty space he never dared to let me step into. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. That answer was enough for me to see that our life had been standing on thin ice for years without me realizing it. Maya suddenly started crying. Not loud, not sobbing, just tears falling onto the back of her hand, each drop heavy, like it carried a stolen year of her childhood. She asked a question none of us in the room were ready to hear. "Do you even want me?" The air turned to stone. Liam put both hands over his head, then bent forward, and I heard him cry, really cry, not holding back, not hiding. It was the first time I'd ever seen him like that. Hurt but honest, collapsing but no longer running from it. I stood between them, my heart pulled in two directions, toward the man I love, and toward the child who looks so much like him it's impossible to deny. Both of them were breaking in their own way, and neither knew what came next. The room was small, but the pain spilling through it was enough to drown all three of us at once. The moment Liam broke under Maya's question, I felt the room closing in around the three of us. None of us were calm enough to keep talking in that heavy air. I gently placed my hand on Maya's back and whispered, "Let's step outside for a bit." She nodded almost instantly, like she needed air just as badly. I took her to the backyard. The late afternoon light was quiet, the breeze soft, giving us a brief sense of safety. Maya sat on the wooden chair, pulled her knees up, and wrapped her arms around them like a familiar form of protection. I didn't say anything. No one needed advice right now. What she needed was someone who stayed. After a while, Maya spoke first, her voice small but steady. She told me about the years she lived without anything that resembled a real family. Even when her mother was alive, life wasn't any more stable. Constant moving, money never enough, her mother's friends drifting in and out like passing winds. She said her mother loved her, but that love wasn't enough to keep them in one place. When Rachel died, Maya lived on the kindness of a friend's family, and once she turned 18, she had to take care of herself completely. When she talked, I didn't judge. I didn't interrupt. I just listened, so she could feel that her story, the whole story, the one no one had ever had the patience to hear, was finally being received by someone. In every word Maya spoke, I saw one thing clearly. She wasn't looking for someone to blame. She hadn't come to break anything. She came because she wanted to know where she belonged. And that was the moment I understood. Maya wasn't a threat to my family. What damaged my marriage wasn't the existence of a child. It was the secret the adults chose to keep. Liam's silence was what pushed us into that cold distance. I wondered if I was strong enough to accept all of this big, sudden truth that shook the sense of safety I'd always had. But when I looked at Maya, sitting there with eyes both proud and fragile, I knew the answer. Yes, I could be strong enough for this. Because I knew what was right. Because I knew she wasn't at fault. When we walked back inside, Liam was standing by the table, both hands braced against the wood like he needed it to keep himself upright. He looked up as we entered, his eyes red like someone who had just fallen into the deepest fear of his life. He apologized. Not the kind of apology meant to explain or defend. It was the apology of someone who knew he had caused real harm and had nowhere left to hide. He said he ran from his past because he was ashamed, because he didn't know how to tell me everything without breaking what we'd built together. He said he feared the truth would make our marriage feel like it stood on something fragile. I looked him in the eyes. The betrayal isn't your daughter. I said, the betrayal is the silence. Liam closed his eyes, as if that sentence touched the exact place he'd spent years avoiding. No argument, no excuses, just acceptance. The air went quiet in a different way, not tense anymore, just heavy. And just when I thought we'd reached a point of stillness, Maya suddenly stood up. She spoke softly but clear enough for both of us to hear. I shouldn't have come. I'm messing up your life. My heart pulled tight. This girl had grown up with so much instability. She believed her existence alone was a burden. I stepped forward, took her hand, gentle but firm. You're not a mistake, I said. None of us are suffering because of you. We're just learning how to stand still in the truth. Maya swallowed through a tight breath. It was the first moment I saw her shoulders drop a little, like the weight on her back had lifted just enough for her to breathe. The three of us sat down again, this time closer, not like opponents, but like three people trying to mend a cracked mirror, each holding a sharp piece in their hands. Maya looked at Liam, her eyes full of fear but also hope. Do you even want to get to know me? She asked. Liam placed a hand on his chest like he needed to feel his own heartbeat before he could answer. I do, he said, voice tight. I just don't know if I deserve to. The air shifted at that. Liam wasn't lying. He truly believed he had failed years ago, and now, facing his daughter, he didn't know if he had the right to step into her life. I spoke slowly, so they both could hear the weight of it. Family isn't about who deserves who. It's about who chooses who. Liam looked at me as if I'd opened a door he thought was sealed shut forever. Maya looked down at her hands, then up again with softer eyes. The room seemed warmer, but only a little, like sunlight peeking through after a storm, the kind you're not ready to trust just yet. Right then, Maya reached into her backpack and took out an old envelope. She opened it and pulled out a sheet of paper with creased corners. She handed it to Liam. He took it with both hands, like it might fall apart if he held it too tightly. Mom wrote this before she died, Maya said. Liam unfolded the letter. I stood beside him, watching his eyes move across each line, then stop for a long time at the last one. If she ever finds you, don't push her away again. Liam gripped the paper, his head bowing as his breath stuttered. I rested my hand on his shoulder. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The room already held everything. Loss, guilt, tenderness. Maya looked at us, and for the first time since she walked into our home, her eyes held a bit of calm. Not happiness, but the first release after a long journey built on fear and disappointment. The air in the room eased. There was still so much left unspoken, so much we hadn't touched yet, but at least we weren't standing at opposite ends of the pain anymore. We were in the middle of it together, close enough to hear each other breathe, close enough to start again. We agreed not to try fixing everything in one night. Too many years, too many wounds, too much silence couldn't be untangled with a single conversation. I suggested we meet again the next day, calmer and clearer. Maya nodded. Liam nodded. I nodded too. Just a small gesture, but it felt like a promise. None of us needed to speak aloud. The next morning, the house held a different kind of quiet. Not the heavy silence of secrets or fear, but a stillness that gave everything a chance to begin again. Soft sunlight slid through the kitchen window, laying a warm stripe across the wooden floor. I made a drink for myself, then for Maya. Liam leaned against the counter, looking tired but lighter, like someone who'd survived a storm and was still standing. We sat down without the stiffness of the night before. Still awkward, but no longer guarded. For the first time, it felt like the three of us were trying to step into a new shape, an unfinished family, with gaps and folds, but forming all the same. Liam turned to Maya first. He took a deep breath and held her gaze, not looking away like he did last night. I should have fought harder for you. His voice was low and steady, not the kind of self-pity people use when they want forgiveness without accountability. This was a man owning the choices he didn't have the courage to make. Maya didn't respond for a few seconds, but when she gave the smallest nod, I knew his apology had reached the exact place she needed it to. I opened up too. I looked at Maya first. This door isn't closed to you, I said. It wasn't an easy sentence, but it was the true one. True to my heart this morning. True to what I'd seen yesterday. Maya wasn't here to take anything from us. She just wanted something to hold on to. Then I turned to Liam. If we're going to keep going, I said, you have to choose complete honesty. No more gray areas, no more keeping me on the outside. Liam nodded right away. No hesitation. And in his eyes, I saw something like relief. The kind that comes when a person finally decides to live without hiding. We talked a bit about the practical things. What would change, what we still didn't know how to handle. But in the middle of all that uncertainty, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Last night, the truth felt like a wave meant to knock me down. This morning, it felt like a strange new shoreline, one I could learn to walk on. I realized I was strong enough to stand inside the truth. Strong enough to face it without letting it erase who I am. Liam, by sitting with Maya instead of running, was finally learning something he'd avoided his whole life. The past doesn't disappear just because we pretend it's gone. It stops hurting only when we're brave enough to look at it and call it by its name. And Maya, she finally had something many people wait their whole lives for, the feeling of being seen. Not as a shadow of someone's mistakes, but as a person with worth, with history, with a future. Sometimes healing isn't about putting everything back the way it was. It's accepting that everything has changed and knowing you can keep going anyway. I saw the three of us, a man carrying old wounds, a girl carrying years of absence, and me, standing where their worlds met, learning how to build something new, something more honest. In the last quiet moment before we stood up, I thought of this whole story like a crack in an old wooden table. No one wants it there, but once it appears, you have to decide whether to cover it or accept it as part of the structure and let the light slip in through that split. Some families begin with a photo on a table. Some begin with shared loss. Some begin with the hardest question, do you even want me? Ours began with a message sent to the wrong person. I looked at the two of them and said quietly, sometimes the thing that breaks us is the same thing that opens a door for us to find ourselves again. Not every family starts whole, but everyone deserves a chance to belong. Maya smiled, just a little. Liam let out a long breath, soft and relieved, like he'd finally set down the weight he'd carried for years. When Maya got ready to leave so she could rest before seeing us again the next day, I walked her to the door. She turned back, looked at me for a long moment, and said something I know I'll never forget. Thanks for not pushing me away. I answered, you came with the truth, that's enough. When the door closed, I leaned against it and let my body settle. No more fear, no more doubt, just the quiet peace that comes after a storm.